Seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Tonight, Eye on America, why many schools are struggling to pass the test when it comes to infrastructure. Then the aftermath of a tornado outbreak from the Midwest to the East Coast. And on this D-Day anniversary, a love story 80 years in the making on the CBS Evening News.
When this election is over, based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them.
Hallie Biden took to the witness stand today to testify in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial.
The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Former President Trump is returning to the campaign trail in Phoenix tonight. Arizona, of course, is a battleground state, and it is his first stop on the campaign trail since he was convicted last week in New York of 34 felonies. But first, it was 80 years ago today that Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, the invasion leading to the defeat of the Nazis 11 months later. President Biden marked the day of remembrance in France. He and the First Lady met with World War II veterans at the Normandy American Cemetery. In his remarks, the president drew parallels to the current war between Russia and Ukraine.
America's unique ability to bring countries together is an undeniable source of our strength and our power. Isolationism was not the answer 80 years ago, and is not the answer today.
I promise you we will head to Phoenix in just one moment. That's where we'll find our Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is covering the Trump event. But I want to start with our Ed O'Keefe, who is traveling with the president. Ed, great to see you. I want to play a shot also from, that is to say, sound over tape. That's some news lingo for you, ladies and gentlemen, of the president in his remarks. Yes, TV talk at Normandy. Control room, let's roll that, and then we'll have Ed talk on the other side.
Here in Europe, we see one stark example. Ukraine has been invaded by a tyrant bent on domination. Ukrainians are fighting with extraordinary courage, suffering great losses, but never backing down.
Ed, it seems that Ukraine is the umbrella around which this ceremony and this commemoration takes place.
Or the country that the leaders that are here wanted to envelop with their support, yes. Quite striking to see the president make such strong statements against a former ally, and an ally that helped pull off the successful victory during World War II. There were no Russian officials invited by the French government to this year's commemorations. They've been here in the past. But with the United States, the United Kingdom, and others concerned about having Russian officials in attendance when Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was also scheduled to be here, it was determined they could not be. And to have the president be so forceful in that way, saying what he said there about them essentially being a tyrant, later calling them a bully, suggesting that they're part of the ongoing struggle between autocracy and democracy and this push to blow away borders at their own will. Pretty tough language for an adversary that sits at the other end of this continent trying to invade one of their neighbors.
And Ed, I know you spoke with National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby about this and other matters. What did he have to say?
Well, specifically about what the president's doing tomorrow. He's headed back to that part of France to Pointe du Hoc, a 100-foot cliff or so between the Omaha and Utah beaches, where Army Rangers stormed to overtake German artillery that was attempting to keep troops from getting ashore. The president's going to go to a spot other commanders-in-chief have spoken before about America's sacrifice. And while today's address was designed to reach a global audience, the White House has signaled to us tomorrow's more for domestic consumption, and John Kirby explained. Take a listen.
What the president wants to focus on tomorrow is really drawing out the human story of the sacrifice and the service and the bravery of those Rangers that climbed that cliff and took out those gun emplacements, which made subsequent landings of D-Day possible. He's also going to talk about, and he talked a little bit about it today, but he's going to talk a little bit more about democracy. He's going to talk about the gift that those soldiers gave us and the world, and how we have to treasure and cherish that gift going forward and do everything we can to preserve it.
So what it sounds like we're expecting tomorrow, Major, is a more implicit message against his would-be Republican opponent, Donald Trump, what he's been doing and saying and facing in courtrooms in recent weeks, and trying again to remind American voters that you can restore the norms of the world, the Western world, in the forthcoming election, or you can put them all at risk should you support Donald Trump. Pretty striking if he's making even an implicit case for his candidacy and for the current way of American governance on foreign soil. That's not usually how it's done.
Ed, I must imagine that this is a particularly poignant commemoration. It always is. But at the 80-year mark, there are precious few remaining living members of the brave assaultive forces that got that narrow toehold on France, which propelled the Allies toward the ultimate defeat of Nazi Germany.
So the stat that we've been using all week that I think is most telling is we were told by American Airlines, for example, they used to fly about 6 plane loads of American veterans to these commemorative events. This year, they couldn't fill 1 plane because there are so few left that are either alive or capable of coming. The youngest in their roughly mid-90s, the oldest, I believe I was told, is about 107 who was in attendance. One of the veterans who met the president today turned 104 on this day today. The president saying happy birthday to him. But yes, this is likely to be the last time veterans of D-Day, or D-Day plus a few days, are in attendance. Major.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you so very much. Former President Trump, as we told you, is speaking at a town hall in Phoenix. It is organized by the political advocacy arm of Turning Point USA, a conservative youth organization that has seen its influence rise in recent years. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now from Phoenix. Caitlin, set the scene for us.
Hey, Major, good to see you. Well, this is Trump's first visit since his conviction on 34 counts just a week ago today. And it's also his first visit to Arizona this year. Arizona, as you know, is a critical battleground state. He is unlikely to be able to win the presidency without this state. And as you remember, in 2020, he lost Arizona by 10,000 votes. And in the aftermath of the election, Arizona really became kind of ground zero for false claims about the election. Election denialism really bred here. And as you mentioned, Turning Point USA, its leader, Charlie Kirk, is considered a top election denier and has become a close ally of the former president. His group is based here in Arizona. And as you referred to, they have seen their stock in the Trump orbit and in the Trump era really rise. Kirk was influential, for example, in helping to oust Ronna McDaniel as the RNC chair. So it's really telling, Major, that in his first campaign appearance since that conviction and his first stop in Arizona this campaign cycle, he is choosing to appear on stage with Kirk at this event.
And as I look at some of the excerpts released by the Trump campaign, a heavy, heavy influence, or rather rhetorical reference, Caitlin, to immigration.
That's right, Major. He is expected to focus his remarks specifically on immigration. That is a top issue here. We see that in our polling, of course, given that it is a border state. And we have also seen that Trump has enjoyed a little bit of a lead here in our polling, especially since immigration is top of mind. But Major, you know, in a border state, it's a very nuanced issue, as you well know. Yesterday, we spent some time talking to voters, some voters that we talked to that were supportive of Trump, a couple that we spoke to were actually immigrants, and they were very concerned about what is happening at the border. They argued that they came in legally and want others to do the same. But we also spent time, Major, with a citrus farmer outside of Phoenix whose industry and his business specifically depends on immigrant labor. And he's very concerned, he told us, about the negative rhetoric on immigrants, and also concerned about what Republicans have done this week, which is state Republicans passed a measure to have a ballot measure in November that would essentially, if passed, allow local police to arrest migrants at the border. This is similar to what we have seen in Texas. Now, that is going to be on the ballot in November, and Republicans are hoping that that will gin up turnout in this battleground state, especially since abortion rights groups have secured a measure on the ballot in November here to make abortion access a constitutional right. So you're going to have this battle really here in Arizona on these two key issues, and we'll see which drives turnout the most.
Immigration or abortion access. Getting back to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, it strikes me, Caitlin, in some states, state Republican parties are losing revenue, losing organizational support, and they may be being pushed aside by organizations like Turning Point. It feels like that may be happening in Arizona most prominently of all.
That's right, Major. Turning Point USA has been able to raise a lot of money. Kirk himself has become really wealthy in this role. And what's significant, too, is that this is a group that is designed to turn out young voters. But Major, we've seen a shift in their approach. And we've seen this shift on the kind of national scale as well, which is that this is a group, of course, that falsely makes claims about the election. But now they are turning to trying to encourage people to vote early and vote by mail. Republicans acknowledging that they had given up ground on that.
Gave up ground in 2020. Of course, those like me who remember Arizona Republicans organizing in the early 1990s on early and absentee voting find a full circle moment surrounding the whole issue of denialism and lying about what happened in the 2020 election. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much. An Israeli strike on a school in Gaza has killed more than 30 people, including women and children. That, according to local health officials. The attack hit a United Nations school in central Gaza that was sheltering displaced Palestinians at the time of the strike. Now, Israel has claimed, but has yet to show any evidence, that Hamas was operating out of this building. It's day 4 of Hunter Biden's federal gun trial, why the testimony of his brother's widow could make or break the government's case. And throughout this hour, we will look back at former presidents honoring the sacrifices made on D-Day. Let us start with then President Ronald Reagan commemorating the 40th anniversary.
The living here assembled, officials, veterans, citizens, are a tribute to what was achieved here 40 years ago. This land is secure. We are free. These things are worth fighting and dying for.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
that kind of
Oh,
thing.
that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to America Decides. Hunter Biden's ex-girlfriend and the widow of his brother Beau took the stand in his federal gun trial today. Hallie Biden testified she found and later discarded the gun at the center of this criminal case. She discovered the weapon while clearing out the president's son's car in 2018. Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty to 3 felonies stemming from his alleged purchase of the revolver. Scott McFarland joins us from outside the federal courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware. Scott, summarize today's testimony and its importance in the case.
Make no mistake, Major, this was the star witness, and this was a pivotal moment in the 4th day of this trial. The most tense, the most dramatic moments happened today. Hallie Biden, of course, the widow of Beau Biden, acknowledged to the jury right off the bat, Major, that she took up a romantic relationship with her brother-in-law shortly after Beau Biden's death. And then she told the jury, told the prosecution after being asked that it was Hunter who introduced her to crack cocaine, which she began taking in 2018. Then she described what happened October 23rd, 2018, which is so weight-bearing, potentially, to this case, saying she was searching Hunter Biden's car outside her home to ensure there were no drugs or alcohol in there that the kids would get access to if they drove the car. Said she found drug residue, found drug paraphernalia, and found that gun, that Colt 38, in a satchel, and said she panicked, brought it to a grocery store parking lot nearby, tossed it in the dumpster, would later go try to retrieve it. It was gone already. That was just a part of what she said today, but you can tell in the room that the jury's attention was primed throughout her multi-hour testimony beginning mid-morning today.
And why was that testimony so central, Scott, to what the prosecution is trying to convince the jury of?
The fundamental allegation from prosecutors, Major, is that Hunter Biden not only possessed a gun while using or addicted to drugs, but knowingly made false statements on the application to get the gun by not acknowledging he's a drug user or drug addict. What Hallie Biden testified to today was that the gun was found near drug residue, and it was found just 11 days after he purchased it. She also testified to the frequency with which Hunter Biden used drugs. So all of that has the potential of bolstering the prosecution's case. Under cross-examination, defense attorney Abby Lowell tried to press Hallie Biden about whether she knew exactly where Hunter Biden was that day in which the gun was found, that day in which the drug residue was found. And he was trying to press her on a lack of clarity as to where Hunter Biden was with respect to the vehicle, respect to the gun, respect to the potential crack cocaine. They're trying to build a wedge before they present their case tomorrow. But here's another item, Major, that's worth noting. In cross-examination of a different witness, the gun store manager who sold the gun, they tried to press the issue that the gun form Hunter Biden filled out might have been less than clear. When they asked the question, are you a drug user? Saying that's different than asking, have you ever been a drug user? And that if Hunter Biden thought he was getting sober or in recovery, he may have answered it in his mind truthfully. That's where the defense could be headed when they open up their presentation, probably around the lunch hour tomorrow.
Scott, this is a family drama with some sad details. Some might even argue sordid details. President Biden was asked by ABC a couple of key questions about this matter. What did he say?
When asked if he would rule out a pardon for Hunter Biden, President Biden reportedly told ABC News, yes. Kind of closing the door to a potential pardon for a defendant in this case, Major, who does face the prospect of prison time if he's convicted by this 6-man, 6-woman jury. But having sat through nearly a week of this, Major, let me tell you, I go to a lot of trials. There are light moments of levity in most trials, no matter the stakes. That just is not the case here. This is transcendently sad.
Scott McFarland in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you.
The struggle between a dictatorship and freedom is unending.
President Biden addresses threats to democracy 80 years after the turning point in the European theater in World War II. We'll take a closer look at what he had to say about the war in Ukraine when we come back.
Today, many of them are here among us. Or they may walk with a little less spring in their step, and their ranks are growing thinner. But let us never forget, when they were young, these men saved the world.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. President Biden drew linkages between World War II and Russia's war on Ukraine in his D-Day address today. The president said that surrendering to bullies is, quote, simply unthinkable.
We will not walk away. Because if we do, Ukraine will be subjugated, and it will not end there. Ukraine's neighbors will be threatened. All of Europe will be threatened. And make no mistake, the autocrats of the world are watching closely to see what happens in Ukraine, to see if we let this illegal aggression go unchecked.
Joining me now, Margaret Brennan. She, of course, is CBS News' chief foreign affairs correspondent and the moderator of Face the Nation. Margaret, another episode in which the rhetoric is fulsome and aggressive, full of guarantees. Ukrainian President Zelensky was there listening to all of it, but as you well know, President Zelensky has often told the United States and the leaders of Europe, God, I love your rhetoric. I need more reality. Mm-hmm. Is there a gap or a shrinking gap between rhetoric and reality? Is Europe and the United States on the same page?
Well, one of the things that President Biden and his officials are most proud of, and they get credit for from even some of their critics, is to this point, keeping the Western alliance largely unified, with the notable exception within NATO of Hungary. Oftentimes, votes have to happen with Viktor Orban out of the room. Right. But when it comes to the basic premise, Europe was terrified by the fact that Russia was so blatant in attacking European capital, not just nibbling away at the edges like they had started to do back in 2014. When that invasion happened, it changed everything in Europe. But there still are differences of opinion here. French President Emmanuel Macron gave an interview to French TV today saying tomorrow he will make some announcements about more training of troops. The question is, does that happen inside Ukraine or outside Ukraine, where it's currently happening? That's a point of difference and debate right now within the alliance. How quickly weapons are delivered. And French President Macron has said something far more forward-leaning than President Biden or the German Chancellor are comfortable with, and that is, don't take off the table at least the threat of sending troops to fight in Ukraine. So the allies aren't completely perceiving the threat in the same way. President Biden's really trying to manage this and has been criticized for perhaps being slow in making decisions he ultimately gets to. Right? He could have made them earlier on in the process. So they're not completely on the same page, but they are directionally there. One thing that could be a factor to watch, we have the European parliamentary elections this week. There is a rise within the far right of many of these parties in Europe, and it's not clear how that's going to impact some of the decision-making.
Particularly in Germany and France, yes. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on CBS Mornings echoing the comments of President Biden. Let's take a quick listen to that.
After 2 world wars, we wanted to do everything possible to make sure that there wouldn't be a third. Yeah. And at the heart of that is an international order, an understanding that one country can't simply violate the territory of another by force, change its borders by force, seize its land, try to dominate its future. Yeah. If we don't stand up for those rules in our time, then we risk seeing what happened in the time that we're commemorating today.
Your response?
Well, that's the international rules-based order, which sounds like you're back in a college classroom. But that's everything we take for granted, right? That's the UN. That's the International Court of Justice. That's the World Bank. That's the IMF. All the architecture that was created to prevent conflict. Here's the challenge right now. Is the other superpower on the rise, China, wants to change those rules in their favor. And that's a big tension right now. Their ally in this, Russia, the weaker of the two, is working with them to help. And vice versa. That's one of the perceived challenges for the United States. Secretary Blinken would be the first to say it is, China is helping to arm Russia in Ukraine. Iran is, North Korea is. You're seeing this sort of access develop to challenge Western allies and potentially rewrite those rules to say might does make right And that could be an indicator of perhaps China's intentions with Taiwan. That's the thinking there. But in terms of how the United States pushes back on that, that's right now, someone like Mitch McConnell, who had that powerful op-ed in the New York Times today, was saying, don't just praise the fighting rightfully that took place back in World War II, but note it was the fumbling in to conflict that happened. These moments that precede conflict are consequential, and pointing back that we might be in one right now.
You might be in one right now. Margaret Brennan, thank you very much. Who will former President Trump's running mate be? That's a big conversation here in Washington, possibly across the country. The VP stakes, as they are sometimes referred to, will come down and we'll know more by the Republican National Convention, middle of July. We'll take a look at some of the contenders next, right here on America Decides.
These men heard the guns. Visitors will always pay respects at this cemetery. But these veterans come looking for a name and remembering faces and voices from a lifetime ago.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Indiana Governor Mike Pence was my first choice. I've admired the work he's done.
And I accept your invitation to run and serve as Vice President of the United States of America.
Here in TV land, we don't apply captions to archival footage like that, but if we did, the caption would read, "In happier times." That was former President Trump introducing then Indiana Governor Mike Pence. Of course, Trump was not president then. He was the nominee of the Republican Party as his running mate. Of course, Mike Pence has not endorsed and will not endorse former President Trump's bid for re-election now. But, of course, the former president, as the presumptive Republican nominee, is tasked yet again with selecting a running mate. Several Republican options have been requested to provide documents. That's called a vetting process. The list is not limited to, but it includes South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who both briefly challenged Trump for the nomination. I want to bring in our political panel. Ashley Etienne and Hogan Gidley join me now. Ashley, as you might remember, previously served as communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris. Hogan previously served as White House Deputy Press Secretary in the Trump White House. Hogan, let me start with you.
You always start with me.
I usually do. To the degree you know anything about it, what would you say the state of the vice presidential search process is?
In flux, focused. I think that's usually how it goes. It's obvious they have some names that they're looking at. I don't even know if that list is entirely complete. I learned a long time ago when working with Donald Trump to understand what we see in the press may not be exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And even when decisions are made, it doesn't mean they're actually made. Until he picks someone, I'm just going to kind of reserve judgment. I'm happy to say I do believe most of these folks, if not all, would be extremely good vice presidential picks for a lot of different reasons. Tim Scott, of course, my senator from the state of South Carolina. Burgum brings a lot of things to the table as well. No D.C. baggage, for example. A lot of folks like that. A businessman. So, you know, it's going to be a while, I think, until he makes a pick.
I have been told that the former president, when he thinks about this and considers fitness to succeed him if something bad should happen, he refers to that regularly, believes a two-term governor is better positioned than someone who is a senator. Do you think that's true?
I think so, and I think there's a reason that
that's why people think that Burgum's got kind of a way not necessarily in, but is being given a serious look.
Of course, and there are very few senators that have been president of the United States. Barack Obama, of course, an exception there, but a lot of times and I guess Biden too, for that matter, but a lot of them come from the gubernatorial ranks because, as you know, states are kind of microcosms of the federal government. You are the chief executive of your state, and so the job itself and what it entails readies you as best you can be readied for being president.
Ashley, it really doesn't matter for Democrats, does it? This is a Donald Trump election.
Well, more importantly, I think the one thing that I just heard that I was unaware of is Donald Trump preparing not to complete a term if he becomes president. Like, that's the part that just...
No, he always says if the worst happens, meaning if something happens to him.
You know, he is 80-some-odd years old and unhealthy and all that. But nevertheless, here's the thing. Usually when a presidential candidate picks a vice president, it's to shore up the person's negative, to expand the actual base. Here's sort of how I see it. I think, you know, that's why Donald Trump chose Pence. But January 6th happened, and I think Trump learned a lesson on that day. Pence chose the nation over Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump's going to make that mistake again. I think who he chooses this time around is going to put Trump before anything else. Loyalty is the most important criteria by which I think he's going to select his vice presidential candidate. And if you look at all of these guys, they're all guys. They're all MAGA types.
Stefanik's on there.
Oh, excuse me, a woman, yes.
Elise Stefanik, member of the House Republican leadership.
All MAGA types, MAGA Republicans, who would put their loyalty to Donald Trump before that of the country. That is a concern, but I think that's how Donald Trump's going to choose. He's not going to make the mistake that he made last time. He's not going to choose anyone who's not going to put him before the country. So that's. But I will say, I think you're right. I think the best candidate on that list is Tim Scott, and I'll say why. Because Tim Scott is going to be loyal. He is a MAGA Republican, but more importantly, he would expand his base. I think he can pick up some black voters.
Hogan, as you well know, there is this sidecar conversation among Republican donors who like Nikki Haley, who supported Nikki Haley, to try to get her back in the conversation. And many of those donors who were on the sidelines are coming back into the Trump orbit, perhaps with that goal in mind, among many others. How would you assess Nikki Haley's prospects?
Well, again,
knowing that conversation is real.
Yes, of course. And we went from a South Carolina senator to Nikki Haley, who was my governor. So I'm well aware of her attributes and her abilities. I think in most elections, as we would probably both agree, the vice presidential pick doesn't mean much because it's a top-of-the-ticket election. This one's different. You're talking about Joe Biden, that no one believes is going to finish a second term. And so Kamala Harris, well, you're the one. It's nice to meet you. Kamala Harris will most assuredly become president in the second term under Joe Biden. So the VP pick does matter here. The Nikki Haley piece is interesting because if I'm reading the tea leaves right, and the people I talk to inside the campaign are being honest with me, and I have no reason to think they aren't, You also want someone who's going to continue the America First agenda, the Make America Great Again mantra. Nikki Haley does not do that, and she does not shore up or excite your base, which you are going to need in this election.
She might create as many base problems as she does attract,
if not more,
marginally attached Republicans.
If not more. They want to move away from the globalist, corporatist wing of the party, and that's her position. That's her part in the party. So many don't want to go back to that, and I'm afraid it would really depress turnout from the base.
I mean, poor Nikki Haley. She got nothing for compromising her values. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, like, no disrespect to the governor, but she, supported Donald Trump and got nothing out of that deal.
Actually, the Washington Post wrote a column, or carried a column this week that said black voters in America don't like either of their options. And that is more of a problem for President Biden than it is for former President Trump.
Yes, so there was that article. I think one thing we should do, and I've been thinking about this for some time, I think it's important to consider the world in which voters are living in and how they're processing the world. Many of these voters voted for the first time for president. They voted for Barack Obama. And they saw how Barack Obama was treated. I mean, the Republicans, burned him at the stake for not wearing a lapel pin, for wearing a tan suit, for putting his foot up on the Resolute desk. Meanwhile, they're saying nothing as Donald Trump contrived an elaborated scheme to overturn the election and incite an insurrection on January 6th. So those voters are processing that new world. And I think overall, they're just feeling less hopeful and optimistic about their own state. And then the other thing I would add to that is you got the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action. I think from a lot of different vantage points, that voting bloc is feeling like they're under siege. And the problem for the president is he needs to listen more. Yep. And secondly, he needs to find a way to inspire them. They're not inspired to come out and vote.
Ashley, you get the last word. Ashley at the end. Hogan Gidley, thanks so very much for your time. Rating the reliability of news and information websites. Stephen Brill joins us to discuss his new book. That's next. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. We live in a world where facts and truth are under siege. A new book takes a deep dive into the rise of conspiracy theories online and what can be done to counter them. Stephen Brill joins us now. He is the co-founder of NewsGuard, which rates the reliability of news and information websites. He is also the author of a brand new book titled The Death of Truth. So, Stephen, great to see you. Let's start with the title of the book. The Death of Truth. Is truth dead or merely in a coma?
I'm glad you asked. I would prefer to say it's in a coma because, as you know, I spend a good part of the book trying to explain how to take it out of that coma. So
what put it in the coma? Yeah. What put it in the coma in the first place?
I think a combination of four things, some of which are easily appreciated. One is that when the social media platforms picked up steam and started getting the millions and hundreds of millions of participants, it turns out that they created algorithms, as we now know, that were engineered to send people to the most inflammatory content, because that's what got the most eyeballs. And inflammatory content meant, for example, as I explained in the book, that in 2013, a young woman out in Silicon Valley who had just had a newborn baby goes online on Facebook, innocently just trying to get some information about what's the vaccine regimen my baby ought to have, and she's stunned to find this vituperative debate over the safety of the most benign vaccines, measles vaccines, and she can't believe it. And the more she reads this stuff, the more she's sent other content debating other, seemingly not debatable issues like whether jet planes cause chemical entrails that cause, blizzards, all this crazy stuff. So it's the social media platforms becoming the source of news and not reliable news for so many people, so much of the time, to what's something that probably a lot of your viewers don't know much about, which is programmatic advertising, which replaces the kind of advertising decisions we always used to be used to, where advertisers would decide, I really want to be on CBS News, not on, this local channel, or I want to be in this magazine or newspaper, not that one, where it's all done by automated algorithm, and it's done based on auction, and it goes to the lowest bidder gets your eyeballs. And the result of that is that hoax news, Russian disinformation, gets billions of dollars in ad revenue, which finances all this stuff. And then with those two factors are the demagogues and the hoaxsters and the conspiracy theorists who take advantage of those two things and create the environment that we're now in. And the last piece of it is the people who are susceptible to those demagogues and hucksters for whom the system has sort of stopped working, and they want to believe in easier solutions or solutions that just aren't solutions at all, such as, COVID is a hoax. I don't have to take this vaccine. And we end up in a situation where 225,000 more people died in the United States than would have if the take-up rate for the COVID vaccine had been what it normally would be for these kinds of vaccines.
Stephen, you talk in your book about another story that I want to give you the building blocks of, and then I want you to flesh out for our viewers. John Dugan, Palm Beach, Russia, bioweapons, Ukraine.
Sure. John Dugan is a guy who we at NewsGuard got to know because he had been indicted in Florida for extortion and hacking, fled to Russia and was accepted there, was given asylum there, and ended up becoming a high-level Russian disinformation operative. And when NewsGuard reported that one of his, quote, documentaries, unquote, which was, fake news, was the one that said that there was a secret bioweapons lab in Ukraine. When he published that on YouTube, it gave the Russians one of the excuses they wanted to have to invade Ukraine. And when we published the fact that YouTube was still featuring that documentary, YouTube took it off. He got angry and launched a series of threats against me and my family in New York from his studio in Moscow. He put up a YouTube that showed an aerial view of my home, talked about my family, talked about where we lived, and it became a really uncomfortable set of threats. And he's still operating from Moscow. In fact, we just did a report that he now has developed, if you can believe it, 167 fake local news websites, websites operating as supposed local news sites in the United States, all pushing divisive, Russian propaganda in advance of the elections this fall.
And just to put a pin in it, Stephen, that quote-unquote documentary about the bioweapons lab was in no way a documentary.
Yeah, thank you for putting that pin in it. I should have done that. Yes, there is no bioweapons lab in Ukraine. It's all a figment of the Russians' very fertile imagination, or John Dugan's fertile imagination. But it's accompanied by video and deep fakes and all this stuff that we've now started to become more familiar with.
Truth is not dead, but it is in something approximating a coma. Stephen Brill, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Federal judge is ordering Steve Bannon to self-surrender to federal prison on July 1st. The decision stems from the longtime Trump ally defying a subpoena to appear before the House committee that investigated the January 6th Capitol riot. Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt in October 2022. He is expected to appeal this matter further. The judge reaffirmed that Bannon can also seek a stay on this particular order, which of course would allow him to further delay when he has to report. The NAACP weighed in today, and significantly so, on the Gaza war debate, what the nation's oldest civil rights organization is calling on President Biden to do. I will speak with the group's leader next. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make
what
sense?
Have you What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has a glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America.
We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Welcome back to America Decides. The NAACP is calling on President Biden to halt all weapons deliveries to Israel and to push for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. The NAACP released a statement that read in part, quote, "It is imperative that the violence that has claimed so many civilian lives immediately stop. Hamas must return the hostages and stop all terrorist activity. Israel must commit to an offensive strategy that is aligned with international and humanitarian laws," unquote. The president and CEO of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, is here with me now. Derek, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Walk us through the decision that the NAACP came to and why.
Well, we are seeing an increase in racial hate crimes here in America, whether it's racism, anti-Semitic activities, or anti-Islamic phobia. We recognize that what happened globally actually have an impact here domestically. And as we approach the November elections, communities should be talking about how we can work together, not about the things that divide us. And it's unfortunate that we are here at this juncture.
The president said last week in remarks at the White House that this war should end and the new day should begin. That's not enough.
Well, we absolutely agree. And he calls for a ceasefire. But calling for a ceasefire and then sending arms, that's inconsistent. We support the right of Israel to defend itself. But we also have grave concerns with the high civilian casualty, particularly of kids. And so as a nation, we must look at how is this going to impact November? Our biggest fear that we have white supremacist sympathizers sitting in the White House. Because the last administration, what happened in 1 week's time, the Latino community was attacked with a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, at a Walmart. The African-American community was attacked with a mass shooting at a Kroger in Louisville, Kentucky. And the very next night, a synagogue was attacked in Pittsburgh. We cannot exist as a nation if we allow the very fabric of this nation to divide us, as opposed to making sure that we stand up and ensure that civilians are not attacked and communities are safe here domestically.
Derek, for those who might hear this request from the NAACP and think, well, that's separating that very large and powerful organization from President Biden on a matter of policy, that might discourage black turnout for President Biden, that might harm him politically. How would you address that inference being drawn?
Well, we are not a spokes organization for the president or any administration. We are nonpartisan, and we don't support candidates, but we also recognize the dire nature that we are confronted with our democracy. The choice in November up and down the ballot isn't whether or not we have candidate A or candidate B, it's whether or not we have a functioning democracy or something less than that. And if we get something less than that, all of our communities could be under attack, especially African Americans, the Jewish community, and the Islamic community. And in this moment, we need to look at ways we can get peace in Gaza, peace in the Congo, so we can begin to focus domestically on what's important.
Has the NAACP reached any conclusions, because this is being debated at the International Criminal Court, as to whether or not Israel has engaged in something that could be alleged or confirmed to be war crimes?
But that's not our role. We support the president's call for a ceasefire. We believe there should be de-escalation. And how do you get there? You stop the arms and you force people to the tables to have true and meaningful conversations so that we can get to a different space in that region of the world.
And when the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, says we cannot have those kinds of conversations, we've been trying to have those conversations with Hamas because they are a terrorist organization bent, according to their own words, on the destruction of Israel, we have to eradicate Hamas in order to have a new future for Gaza, you would say what?
Well, for Netanyahu, we see him no different than Hamas, and that's the problem.
You do not.
We don't see him any difference. We support the people of Israel. We support individuals who seek peace, but unfortunately, he's operating in the same vein as any other fascists would operate, and that's unfortunate. We should be looking at a way forward in peace and not so many civilian children lives. What we're seeing now is undermining the very goal of having a presence in the Middle East in a way in which everyone can really exist. Right now, under that regime, that's not happening.
Derek Johnson, NAACP, thank you very much for your time. That does it for today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.